I wish to begin by thanking the Secretary General for the briefing provided by him and speakers of the various organizations associated with this debate. The debate today affords us an opportunity to reaffirm the value of cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations to address peace and security challenges, including the scourge of terrorism. Terrorism continues to threaten our populations, and on the African continent, it has begun to derail our collective efforts to bring about peace, security, and sustainable development. Continued terrorist attacks across the world have shown us that no nation or region is immune to its threat, and there is no short-term solution to countering the threat and its devastating consequences. If we are to triumph over this scourge, we need, in addition to our national efforts, a strengthening of international, regional, sub-regional cooperation and coordination efforts. Mr. President, a multilateral framework anchored in the United Nations remains critical to preventing and countering the diverse and evolving aspects of this threat. With near universal membership, the United Nations is best placed to foster cooperation across the globe, as well as ensuring support to member states and regions to implement the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy across its 4 pillars. The collective sharing of experiences and information and the adoption of best practices in dealing with our common threats contribute positively to the development and enhancement of our capabilities. It also improves the effectiveness in addressing our specific contexts in countering terrorism. We believe, Mr. President, that regional organizations are key partners of the United Nations in this important task. South Africa has consistently prioritized and enhanced strategic partnership between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations, not only in countering terrorism, but also in conflict prevention and resolution. As a member of this Council, my country continues to strive for closer partnership between the United Nations and the African Union. This takes into account the volume of African conflict situations on the agenda of the Security Council, as well as the growing threat of terrorism across Africa. Different regions of the world experience the threat posed by terrorist groups and/or the return or relocation of foreign terrorist fighters differently. We encourage the development of partnerships with regional organizations, given their understanding of local and regional dynamics and their understanding of what would be required to address the issue. In this regard, the international community must find ways to support efforts by regional organizations aimed at fighting terrorism and violent extremism, including through sharing experiences and providing technical assistance and adequate resources for capacity building. Mr. President, as we ponder solutions to this awful threat, it is essential that we understand and address the root causes and conditions that give rise to terrorism. We should aim to seek political solutions aimed at resolving long-standing conflicts to create the conditions for stability and a better future over the long term. We should seek to address the marginalization of some sectors of the population and address socioeconomic and political disparities. More often than not, where there is conflict, there might also be a deficit of the rule of law, thus allowing terrorists the space to entrench themselves and expand their activities. We have seen this on the African continent with the devastating effects of terror activities in the Sahel following the conflict in Libya associated with the free flow of arms and the rise of terror groups. Mr. President, the African Union has been proactive in dealing with the threat of terrorism, as evidenced by its normative frameworks developed since 1999, primarily the Convention on the Prevention and Combating of Terrorism and its related protocol of 2004, as well as its counter-terrorism strategy adopted in 2015. Likewise, our own Southern African Development Community also adopted its counter-terrorism framework and strategy in 2015. At the domestic level, South Africa adopted its national counter-terrorism strategy in 2013 and has an active action plan in response to it. South Africa believes that due to its very nature, it is difficult to defeat terrorism militarily or solely through the use of coercive measures. South Africa, therefore, remains supportive of counterterrorism initiatives that focus on prevention measures, on addressing conditions that give rise to terrorism, on promoting dialogue, tolerance, diversity, and understanding among peoples, cultures, and religions. As South Africa, we will continue to work with all members of the United Nations, the African Union, the Southern African Development Community, and other relevant parties in addressing the scourge of terrorism and all its attendant manifestations at the regional and international levels. I thank you, Mr. President.